Welcome back to the deep dive. So, you brought us a whole stack of sources. We're talking character breakdowns, origin story interviews, even these international cast lists.
We did.
And our mission today is to build, really, a complete integrated blueprint of the most enduring medical phenomenon of the 21st century.
We're talking about Grey's Anatomy.
And the entire universe it spawns.
This is a massive undertaking, really, because we're not just tracking a TV show. We're tracking a narrative architecture that went global.
Right.
We've got to follow the story's DNA from, Shonda Rhimes' initial creative vision, then across the American spin-offs.
Private Practice, Station 19.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, and this is the really fascinating part, we're going all the way to the Spanish language adaptations, the A Corazon Abierto series.
So our goal here for you is to help you understand the interconnected systems. How does one character's decision, let's say a career move or some heartbreaking complication in surgery, how does that ripple through 3 different shows and even across international borders? We're looking for the universal formula.
That's it. We want to pinpoint what fundamental character types, what relationships and dramatic conflicts are so effective that you can just lift them up whole cloth.
And just drop them somewhere else.
And drop them into a totally different production environment and still get this massive success.
Mm-hmm.
This is your shortcut to mastering the global power of this specific kind of storytelling.
Okay, so let's not wait. Let's start with the origin story, because the creative decision that launched this entire universe was basically looking at the competition and deciding to do the exact opposite.
Right. To really get the genius of Grey's Anatomy, you have to understand the world it was born into back in 2005. The absolute gold standard for medical dramas was ER.
Oh, completely.
And that show was defined by, rapid-fire dialogue, these frantic trauma scenes, and that famous walk-and-talk technique.
Used to just cram massive amounts of plot in while keeping the camera moving.
Exactly. ER was a spectacle of medicine, high-speed triage. The patient of the week was often the main character of that story.
But our sources point out that an ABC Entertainment executive, Francie Calfo, she noted the network needed a medical show that could genuinely stand apart. They were hunting for something fresh.
And Shonda Rhimes delivered this. This structural pivot that just redefined the genre. Calfo's insight was the key, where every other show was speeding up the medical story.
Shonda Rhimes decided to, and this is the quote, find a way to slow it down so you get to know the characters.
That's the core difference right there. The medical cases in Grey's,
yeah,
they weren't just crises to be solved. They were often metaphors for what the doctors were going through emotionally.
Yeah, we weren't just watching a surgery. We were inside Meredith Grey's head, hearing her voice, her darkest thoughts about her career or her love life, all while she's literally standing over a patient's open chest.
The entire emphasis shifted. It moved to the internal lives and the incredibly messy relationships of the staff.
And that gave the show such a strong, distinctive voice. It had this immediate appeal to a massive female audience that was looking for that kind of relational drama inside a high-stakes professional world.
And, for how huge it became, it's funny. It didn't launch with some big fall premiere.
No. It premiered on March 27, 2005. It was a mid-season replacement.
Just filling a time slot.
Yeah, it was just filling the time slot that Boston Legal had left empty.
And it was supposed to be temporary.
Yeah.
The source is pretty clear on this. It was only slated to be in that slot for maybe 4 weeks.
But then the ratings came in.
The moment those first episodes aired, the numbers were just phenomenal. The network knew immediately they had a monster hit on their hands.
The president of ABC at the time, Steve McPherson, he explained the decision to keep it there was purely strategic. He said they had to let the show build on its tremendous momentum through May.
You can't mess with that. The show was generating its own buzz, and moving it would have been a huge risk to that kinetic energy.
So its place in television history was cemented almost by accident.
And that momentum, that tremendous momentum, it quickly led to establishing the visual and structural hallmarks that would define the entire Shondaland medical universe for decades.
Okay, so let's start with the visual style. It uses a single camera setup, which is pretty standard for dramas, gives you that cinematic look. And yes, they did incorporate the famous walk-and-talk filming technique, which, as you said, was popularized by shows like ER and The West Wing.
But here's the thing. The way they use the walk-and-talk is what's different. In ER, it was always about frantic urgency, right? A doctor racing down a hall, yelling orders for 5 different traumas at once.
Right.
In Grey's, it's often used for these quiet, conversational, relationship-driven scenes. Characters gossiping about a breakup while they're getting supplies, or having these intense philosophical debates walking to the elevators.
The movement is there, but the focus is internal.
Exactly. But the subtle genius, I think, is in the costume design. The sources highlight this brilliant piece of visual shorthand that instantly clarifies the power dynamics in the hospital.
The scrub colors.
The scrub colors. It's a fast, nonverbal way to show the hierarchy without needing someone to say, "I'm the boss."
So the attending surgeons, the experts, the ones who actually run the show, they wear navy blue scrubs.
Dark blue, the color of authority.
And the residents and interns, the younger doctors, the ones running around totally exhausted and still learning, they're in light blue scrubs.
So if you're a new viewer, you don't need to hear anyone's title. You just know who's in charge by the depth of the blue they're wearing. It's an incredibly effective piece of design.
And that consistency, it goes all the way to the writing itself. There's this fascinating rule about the episode titles.
Oh, I love this detail.
Nearly every single episode of Grey's Anatomy is titled after a song.
It's amazing. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And that trend was only broken a handful of times in the show's entire history, and usually for a very powerful reason.
It speaks to a very specific creative sensibility, doesn't it? That reference to music, it just emphasizes the emotional, almost operatic tone of the show. It's always meant to feel like this high-stakes emotional performance.
And all of this entire blueprint, it all comes from one person, Shonda Rhimes. When you look at her background, you can actually see the roots of this fascination with the hospital environment.
She grew up in Chicago, youngest of 6 kids, and the key detail, the one that really anchors her interest in this setting.
She was a hospital volunteer in high school.
Exactly. That hands-on experience, even if it wasn't medical, it clearly stuck with her and informed her writing.
Academically, she was all about story. She majored in English and film studies at Dartmouth, got her BA in '91, and then went on to get an MFA in screenwriting from USC. A writer through and through.
And her early career shows that versatility.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to reconcile the intense drama of Grey's with some of her earlier projects, but they were all successful.
Yeah, she was a research director on that Hank Aaron, Chasing the Dream documentary in 1995.
Then she jumps to feature films. She wrote the screenplay for the 2002 Britney Spears movie, Crossroads.
Which, by the way, was a huge financial success. It grossed over $60 million worldwide.
And she followed that up by writing The Princess Diaries 2, Royal Engagement in 2004.
So those early Hollywood wins, they gave her the foundation. She had the creative momentum and, just as importantly, the recognition from executives to pitch something as ambitious as Grey's Anatomy.
And her dominance after that led to a major milestone in TV history.
She became the showrunner, creator, head writer, and executive producer of Grey's and all its spin-offs. And here's the big benchmark.
She was the first woman to create 3 television dramas, Grey's, Private Practice, and the political thriller Scandal that each hit the 100-episode milestone.
In getting to 100 episodes, that's the magic number. That's the benchmark for syndication, for long-term financial viability.
To do it 3 times, that's not just creative success. That shows an incredible amount of executive savvy and an ability to maintain that structural consistency across different shows.
That control let her build this sprawling world we now call Shondaland.
And it meant she could leverage her successful characters into new opportunities, which is exactly how the universe started to branch out from those original 5 interns.
The whole franchise is really built on the foundation of those 5 interns from season 1. They weren't just trainees, they were the pillars of the show's early emotional life.
Absolutely. The tension and the dynamics of that first group. You had Meredith Grey, the dark and twisty protagonist.
Christina Yang, her fiercely competitive, ambitious person.
Izzy Stevens, the empathetic one who used to be a model. Alex Karev, the outsider who starts off cruel but is really complex.
And George O'Malley, the kind but often clumsy underdog. That group dynamic set the standard for every relationship that came after.
And the professional stakes were immediately high. Take George O'Malley's story. Our sources remind us of a critical detail. He failed his intern test.
Right, and that failure was so important for his character arc. It isolated him professionally, which is why he wasn't initially a resident with the others. That career setback just immediately raised the stakes for the whole group.
The early seasons just thrived on those internal and external conflicts, but the key to the show's endurance, its ability to expand, it really lay in the character exits, especially when those exits were dramatic and often tragic.
Let's talk about the character who was the first big catalyst for that expansion. Addison Montgomery.
Kate Walsh.
Kate Walsh, who was initially only contracted for 6 episodes in season 1. She was just supposed to be the bombshell Derek Shepherd's surprise estranged wife. there to make Meredith's life difficult for a little while.
But she was so popular. The complexity she brought to that Derek-Meredith love triangle was so compelling that her role was immediately extended into season 2.
And then promoted to the main cast. She became the other woman that the audience just couldn't bring themselves to hate. And that incredible trajectory proved the blueprint could handle and even thrive on major departures.
As long as the characters were compelling enough to maybe carry their own show.
Exactly.
And speaking of trajectory and high emotional stakes, the Izzy Stevens and George O'Malley stories, they really defined the early tragic potential of that hospital.
Izzy's arc, specifically, it revolved around the ultimate ethical and emotional line crossing, falling desperately in love with the patient, Denny Duquette.
Mm-hmm.
And when Denny died, her reaction, that profound, career-stalling emotional collapse, it became one of the most memorable emotional benchmarks of the show.
It cemented the idea that in this universe, professional boundaries are constantly being sacrificed for romantic passion.
And often with devastating results.
The sources confirm that both of those original characters eventually left, which really signaled the end of that first chapter. George left in season 5, and then Izzy left during season 6. It was a massive structural change for the show.
And it's so important to remember that these early arcs were complicated by things happening in the real world that forced the writers to condense their storytelling.
You're talking about the Writers Guild strike.
The 2007-08 Writers Guild of America strike. Season 4 only had 17 episodes in total because of it.
Wait, so let's dig into that. How does something like a WGA strike, which just cuts down the number of episodes, affect the long-term narrative of a show like Grey's?
It forces you to condense everything drastically. A season that was maybe designed to play out over 22 or 24 episodes suddenly has to wrap up its major plot threads in 17.
So character developments get rushed.
They get compressed. Things like the fallout from George failing his exam, or the early stages of Izzy George's, or their awkward, brief romance. It all had to be squeezed together.
Which would accelerate the pace.
It did. It made season 4 feel a little uneven sometimes, but it proved the writers could adapt that core drama engine even under external pressure.
So even with real-world complications, the focus stayed on the character blueprints. The high emotional stakes were preserved, whether it was professional failure or tragic romance.
As you mentioned with Addison, these blueprints were strong enough not just to survive departures, but to launch entirely new franchises.
The archetype of the high-stakes, ethically compromised, but ultimately brilliant surgeon was portable.
Perfectly portable. And that portability immediately showed itself in 2007 with the first big expansion, Private Practice.
This show focused entirely on Addison Montgomery, moving her from that cold, high-pressure world of Seattle Grace to the more intimate, emotionally complex Oceanside Wellness Center in LA.
And the launch method itself is a really interesting technical detail. They used a backdoor pilot.
Okay, so for anyone who might not know that term, a backdoor pilot is a strategy where an existing show, in this case Grey's, temporarily shifts its focus.
Right. It introduces new characters, new settings, new conflicts within a special episode. It's basically a test run for the spinoff.
And the episode they used was The Other Side of This Life, which was an expanded 2-hour broadcast during Grey's season 3.
Addison takes a leave of absence to go visit her best friend, Naomi Bennett, at the LA practice, and that sets the whole stage for her big move.
But what's critical here is that while the show was a success, the sources are pretty clear that the whole process was controversial internally.
Oh, yeah. The original Grey's cast members, especially Ellen Pompeo and Katherine Heigl, were reportedly very unhappy about it.
Wait, let's unpack that friction. So Ellen Pompeo felt she should have been consulted, and Katherine Heigl had said she was interested in an Izzy Stevens spinoff.
Right.
Does that kind of real-world network drama just reinforce the nature of the show itself?
It absolutely does. The drama we were seeing on screen, the rivalries, the ego battles, the sense of betrayal, it was being mirrored in the production.
It shows that the concept was so powerful that everyone wanted a piece of the expansion.
It was a massive network decision that clearly ruffled some feathers among the core cast who felt their characters were just as deserving of that spotlight.
But the focus did shift to LA, and the character journeys in Private Practice were arguably even more intense and dramatically painful than the ones in Seattle.
They definitely leaned more heavily into existential and ethical dilemmas. Season 2, for example, immediately threw the practice into professional chaos. They were dealing with these debilitating financial troubles.
Which led to a major internal power shift. The staff voted for a new boss, and Addison won the leadership role.
And then professional stability was immediately threatened by rivals. Charlotte King, who becomes a huge character, opened a competing practice, Pacific Well Care, just one floor up.
So it wasn't just a big hospital anymore, it was a small business fighting for its life. That added a layer of financial drama that was missing from Seattle Grace.
And the personal relationships were intensely messy. It was a shift away from the intern dynamic to established professionals who still couldn't get their lives together. Take Violet Turner, the psychiatrist.
Her season 2 arc was pure soap opera gold. She was dating both Dr. Sheldon Wallace and Dr. Pete Wilder at the same time.
Which led to her getting pregnant and having no idea who the father was.
And that uncertainty ended in a shocking, traumatic cliffhanger.
Yeah, the season ended with Violet and her unborn baby being violently attacked by a psychotic patient who was trying to steal the child.
She survived, but the trauma from that defined her whole season 3 arc. Her son, Lucas, was initially cared for by Pete while she went through this profound psychological recovery.
That shift from the medical tragedy of Denny Duquette to this arbitrary, terrifying violence against Violet, it showed the spinoff was willing to push into darker, more ethically ambiguous territory.
And that darkness really culminated in the devastating and totally unnecessary death of Del Parker.
Del was already fighting his own battles, trying to get custody of his daughter Betsy because his ex had drug problems.
In the season 3 finale, there was that catastrophic car accident. It involved Del and also Sam and Naomi's daughter, Maya.
And our sources highlight this absolutely heartbreaking detail. Del's critical condition was tragically overlooked by the surgical staff.
Because they were focused entirely on treating Maya in the operating room.
The irony is just brutal. A medical drama about saving lives, and the main character dies because the staff prioritized someone else. He suffered heart failure and died even after emergency surgery by Amelia Shepard.
A classic Shondaland tragedy. Arbitrary, shocking, and designed for maximum emotional fallout.
And speaking of Amelia Shepard, she became so central to the private practice universe after she showed up in season 3 as Derek's younger sister. Her character arc became maybe the most defining example of Shondaland pushing a character to their absolute limits.
She was promoted to a series regular by season 4, and season 5 became this deep, deep dive into her struggle with substance abuse.
The whole practice had to stage an intervention to force her into rehab.
But when she returned, the drama just intensified. She found out she was pregnant by her now-deceased boyfriend, Ryan, who had also been fueling her addiction.
And then came the devastating medical diagnosis. The baby had anencephaly. It was developing without a brain.
The writers did not shy away from the ethical complexity there. Amelia makes the heart-wrenching choice to carry the child to full term, specifically to donate its organs.
It was a choice that just exemplified the deep well of sacrifice and trauma the Shondaland writers are willing to explore with their characters.
Amidst all this relentless dark drama, the show needed some stability, and it found it by introducing new family units.
Right. Addison, after struggling so profoundly with infertility, finally adopts a child, Henry, in season 5.
And another major shift happened with Cooper, who finds out he's the biological father of an 8-year-old son, Mason, from a one-night stand years ago.
This introduction is actually structurally significant for the entire franchise. Mason starts as a guest star, but he gets promoted to a series regular very quickly.
Which makes Mason Warner the first child character to hold series regular status in the entire Grey's Anatomy franchise.
And that moment signaled a key evolution in the narrative blueprint. The show was shifting its focus from just careers and volatile love lives to the long-term domestic and parental stability of these doctors.
The concept matured into a show about building permanent families.
Yeah, and the series ended with season 6 by giving those characters some hard-earned happy endings. Addison married Jake. Charlotte and Cooper had healthy triplets after a really difficult pregnancy.
Sam and Naomi even remarried.
It wrapped up the California chapter. It proved the spin-off concept was viable, but maybe showed that a slightly different, darker set of conflicts defined that branch of the universe.
So the success of private practice proved the Grey's template was portable geographically. When Shondaland launched the second big spinoff, Station 19,
it aimed to prove the template was portable functionally. It was about creating a narrative web right there in Seattle that connects the operating room to the crisis on the street.
This shift meant the universe expanded into the Seattle Fire Department. The character connections here are critical because they're not just cameos, they are deeply personal. They're built around a core family unit.
The nucleus of that connection is Dr. Miranda Bailey, one of the most foundational characters from Grey's Anatomy.
She's the former chief of surgery at Gray Sloan, and she's married to Ben Warren, the central protagonist of Station 19.
Ben Warren is the perfect bridge for this expansion because he was a series regular on Grey's before he made that dramatic career change to become a firefighter.
And that thematic shift from surgeon to first responder, it fundamentally changes the nature of the whole Grey's universe.
Precisely. As a surgeon, Ben Warren dealt with the results of trauma, the repair after the triage.
Right.
As a firefighter, he deals with the immediacy of the crisis, the life-saving work before they even get to the hospital. It bridges that gap between the medical spectacle and the on-the-ground rescue drama.
And because they're married, Miranda Bailey is a constant presence. She's a recurring character in multiple seasons, guest starring in others. Plus, they're the adopted parents of a child, Prue, so their home life is just as interconnected as their professional lives.
It ensures that when a major crisis hits, the audience sees both sides at the same time. You see the people pulling victims from the wreckage, and you see the people prepping the OR tables.
It creates a total city universe.
And the star power confirms it. Meredith Grey herself was a guest in seasons 1, 3, and 6 of Station 19. When the main character of the original show crosses over, you know these worlds are inseparable.
The world building gets so sophisticated here. Almost the entire main cast from Grey's has crossed over, which highlights that the hospital staff isn't just treating random fire victims. They know the people in the helmets intimately.
You're talking about the Shepard Hunt clan. Dr. Amelia Shepard, chief of neurosurgery at Gray Sloan. She was a guest in seasons 3, 4, 6, and 7.
And her crossovers weren't just medical. In season 7, she was helping Robert Sullivan battle his addiction.
And Owen Hunt, the chief of trauma surgery, he was a guest in seasons 3, 4, and 5. When you have the chiefs of neurosurgery and trauma constantly involved in the firefighters' personal dramas,
it confirms the depth of those emotional bonds. These aren't just procedural acquaintances. They are family or close friends.
Beyond the main doctors, the sources show this massive exchange of supporting characters. Surgical residents, Levi Schmidt, Taryn Helm, Andrew DeLuca, Casey Parker, they all appear.
So the next generation of doctors is also integrated into the firehouse drama.
And key high-level figures crossed over, too. Jackson Avery, Teddy Altman, Tom Korashek, all made appearances. The implication is that the hospital management sees the fire department as an essential, inseparable part of their whole operation.
One of the most emotionally resonant crossovers involved Richard Weber.
The chief medical officer.
He became Robert Sullivan's sponsor in his addiction recovery journey. That crossover went beyond medicine entirely. It cemented this deeply personal, structural bond based on shared vulnerability and mentorship.
It speaks to the power of the Grey's blueprint. You know, it's not just about who's sleeping with whom or who survives a crash, but who takes on the responsibility of supporting another person's deepest personal struggle.
And crucially, the legacy is now being passed down. Meredith's daughter, Zola Gray Shepard, she guest starred in season 6 of Station 19.
And Amelia and Meredith's nephew, Lucas Adams, who's a surgical resident at Gray Sloan, he's also appeared. The structural commitment to continuity is total. It ensures the audience sees one single, continuous, sprawling story unfolding across Seattle.
This whole system, the original show, the geographical spinoff, the functional spinoff, it proves the durability of Rhimes' original character-focused approach.
But the real structural proof of the blueprint's universality, that lies in how successfully it was replicated internationally.
Okay, now for the part of the deep dive that confirms Shonda Rhimes didn't just create a show, she created a narrative algorithm.
Yes.
The international adaptations, A Corazon Abierto or Open Heart, they show that the core character archetypes are universal and globally replicable.
This is where the analysis goes beyond just adaptation and into like structural mapping. We're talking about a Colombian telenovela from 2010 to 2011, created by Fernando Gaitan.
And explicitly noted in our sources as being based on Grey's Anatomy by Shonda Rhimes.
And what's fascinating is how quickly they put that blueprint into action. The Colombian version had characters like Andres Guerra, Maria Alejandra Rivas, and Alicia Duran in the main roles.
Along with Ricardo Cepeda as the equivalent of Richard Weber, the head of surgery, and Javier Burgos as Preston Burke.
The success in Colombia was so strong that the concept was immediately adapted again into a Mexican version of A Corazon Abierto.
Produced by RCN Television with Azteca and Disney Media Networks, still based on Rhimes' work and adapted by Gaitan.
And the fact that producers talked about a third season, and that the Mexican version ran for 138 episodes, with season 2 actually filmed in Mexico, it just shows the massive local investment in this specific franchise template.
This wasn't a cheap knockoff. It was a culturally integrated, high-budget replication.
And when you look at the cast list for the Mexican version, the fidelity to the American original is just astonishing. It's not just a similar show, it is a character blueprint in action. They list the specific Grey's Anatomy equivalent for every major role.
Let's walk through this mapping because it proves the core romantic and professional dynamic is what drives the whole machine. The central romantic hero, Derek Shepherd, the neurosurgeon protagonist,
mirrored by Andres Guerra,
and his love interest, the intern protagonist Meredith Grey, is mapped onto Maria Alejandra Rivas Carrera. The core tension of their on-again, off-again relationship is the engine of the new series.
And the structure of the core 5 interns is perfectly preserved. Cristina Solorzano is Cristina Yang, the competitive best friend.
Augusto Maza is Alex Karev, the abrasive but secretly good-hearted one.
Isabel Heredia is Izzy Stevens, the emotional, deeply ethical intern. And Jorge Valenzuela is George O'Malley, the kind, awkward one.
Even the leadership structure is locked down. The head of surgery, Richard Weber, is Ricardo Cepeda.
And the chief of the first-year interns, Miranda Bailey, is Miranda Carvajal. This is so crucial. That relationship between the interns and their demanding supervisor, the Nazi of the OR, is essential to the show's structure.
The character who provides the main professional rivalry and love interest outside the central couple is replicated too. Preston Burke, the cardiologist,
is mirrored by Javier Burgos.
Okay, now let's look at the engines of romantic chaos. Alicia Duran is Addison Forbes Montgomery, the gynecologist.
And she is tied to Mauricio Hernandez, who is Mark Sloan.
Mark Sloan. Plastic surgeon, Andres' best friend, and critically the main villain in season 1 who slept with Alicia, the Addison equivalent.
So the betrayal element that launched the love triangle in Grey's is translated perfectly into the Mexican adaptation.
But the truly deep-seated structural fidelity, it goes beyond who is sleeping with whom. It extends to the most traumatizing and character-defining plot points from the American original.
Our sources point out that the complex, debilitating parental relationship that defines Meredith Grey's life is replicated with astonishing detail.
Elena Carrera is Ellis Grey, Maria Alejandra's famous surgeon mother who suffered from Alzheimer's.
And here's the most shocking plot translation, which proves this whole concept is a destiny machine.
The intense drama around Elena Carrera's life and death was maintained. She dies of an overdose, a death that the sources specifically note was caused by Dr. Mauricio, the Mark Sloan equivalent in the Mexican version.
Wait a minute. So in the adaptation, the Mark Sloan equivalent doesn't just sleep with the Addison equivalent.
No.
He also causes the death of the Ellis Grey equivalent, compounding the betrayal into this ultimate act of dramatic conflict against the protagonist.
That's not a superficial adaptation. That is the structural core of trauma being translated across a cultural context.
It says so much about the universality of this narrative engine. The writers clearly saw the emotional weight of that Mark Sloan-Derek Addison betrayal, combined with the defining tragedy of Meredith's mother.
And decided that the Mauricio character archetype must perform these precise acts of chaos to fuel the protagonist's journey.
And even specific patient storylines that were foundational to Grey's Season 2 were reproduced. The patient Daniel Duarte
is listed as the explicit equivalent of Denny Duquette, the heart patient who falls in love with Izzy Isabel and ultimately dies.
The emotional core of these characters, regardless of the language or the setting, is maintained.
The character structure that Rhimes created in 2005 is basically a machine for generating high-conflict relational drama. The fact that the most emotionally devastating plot points, Denny's death, George's failure, and now these complex betrayals, were replicated.
It demonstrates that the success of the show is almost predetermined by the role the character occupies in the dramatic architecture.
So what this deep dive reveals is that we weren't just watching a story about 5 interns in Seattle. We were watching a perfectly balanced dramatic algorithm designed for maximum emotional impact and structural longevity.
Our journey today really confirms that the genius of Grey's Anatomy started with its revolutionary pitch, slowing down the high-speed medical story to focus on character relationships and high personal stakes.
And that formula, which was solidified by the visual shorthand of the scrub colors and the narrative rhythm of the song titles, became the rock upon which this entire multi-continent media empire was built.
We tracked the expansion through 3 distinct phases. The survival of core characters through intense, defining exits.
The geographical expansion with Addison Montgomery's controversial move to LA in private practice, which introduced deeper, often darker personal tragedies like Del Parker's death and Amelia Shepard's sacrifice.
And finally, the functional integration of Station 19 using core characters like Ben Warren and Miranda Bailey to weave this narrative web across an entire city's emergency response system.
And we found the ultimate proof of this structural excellence in the Latin American adaptations, A Corazon Abierto. The explicit, detailed character mapping in the Mexican version proves the show's success relies not on cultural specifics, but on a universally effective set of character archetypes.
The Meredith, Christina, the Derek, the Addison, the Izzy, they all must interact in these predetermined, high-conflict ways to get the maximum dramatic output.
And the sources confirm that Shonda Rhimes' influence, born from that initial blueprint, continues to dominate global entertainment. Her company, Shondaland, now controls a huge swath of television.
Successfully pivoting to streaming with hits like Bridgerton and Inventing Anna after her massive Netflix deal.
Solidifying her status as one of the richest women entertainers in America with a net worth of around $250 million as of 2023.
It's an extraordinary legacy, built entirely on mastering character. But having seen how intensely the writers invest in these characters, sometimes leading to these devastating yet replicated tragic exits.
Like the Izzy Denny storyline, or the fact that the Elena Carrera character, the equivalent of Meredith's mother, was killed by the Dr. Mauricio Mark Sloan equivalent in the adaptation.
It raises a profound final question for you, our listener.
We've established that core characters like Meredith Grey and Derek Shepard occupy these structural roles in the narrative engine that define their relationships and conflicts, no matter the language they speak or the actor who plays them.
So if the Ellis Grey character type is structurally destined to die, and the Mark Sloan character type is inherently programmed to cause massive traumatic betrayal, how much of a character's dramatic life is actually a matter of creative design and destiny rather than free will or unexpected plot twists?
When you tune in to Shondaland or any adaptation of its formula, are you truly watching characters forge their own paths?
Or are you simply watching a perfectly structured dramatic algorithm execute its pre-written trajectory, guaranteeing maximum emotional impact every single time?
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.